On an ordinary Tuesday morning, Ethan Miller typed 3 words meant for his son at home. I miss you. One distracted second later, the message landed in the wrong inbox. Claire Anderson's inbox, the CEO who fired people for showing up 2 minutes late. Before he could unend it, the screen flashed. Seen. His chest tightened. Then her office door opened. She crossed the floor in silence, every head turning to watch. She stopped at his desk, leaned down close enough that he could smell her perfume, and whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "Say it again." Ethan kept his head down, fingers frozen over the keyboard, his heart hammered against his ribs. Claire Anderson stood less than a foot away, still leaning toward him, her expression unreadable. The entire floor had gone silent. No one typed. No one moved. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed louder than it should have been. He forced himself to look up. Her eyes were sharp, cold, the kind of gaze that had made grown men stammer during quarterly reviews. She wore a charcoal suit perfectly tailored. Her dark hair pulled back in a way that made her seem even more severe. There was no warmth in her face, no hint of amusement, just that unblinking stare and the faint curve of her lips that could have meant anything. "Miss Anderson," Ethan started, but his voice came out. He cleared his throat and tried again. "That message wasn't meant for you. I'm sorry. It was an accident." She straightened, adjusting the cuff of her sleeve with deliberate slowness. Her eyes never left his. For a moment he thought she might fire him right there in front of everyone. That was her style. Swift, public, efficient. She had let go of a senior analyst last month for missing a deadline by 30 minutes. Ethan had been with the company for 3 years, and in all that time he had never once spoken to her directly. Now she was standing at his desk because of 3 careless words. "An accident," Claire repeated, her tone flat. She glanced at his phone, still face up on the desk, the screen dark now. Then she looked back at him. Interesting. She turned and walked back toward her office without another word. The click of her heels against the polished floor was the only sound in the room. Ethan exhaled, realizing he had been holding his breath around him. Heads began to turn back to their monitors, but he could feel the weight of their curiosity pressing down on him like a physical thing. His phone buzzed. A message from his son, Tyler. "Dad, when are you coming home?" Ethan stared at the screen, guilt twisting in his chest. Tyler was 7 years old, small for his age, with a gap between his front teeth and a habit of asking questions. Ethan didn't always know how to answer. He'd been staying with the neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, since 6:30 that morning. Ethan had promised him pancakes for breakfast, but there hadn't been time. There was never enough time. He typed back quickly, "Soon, buddy. Love you." Then he sat the phone face down and tried to focus on the spreadsheet in front of him. The numbers blurred together. He rubbed his eyes, then glanced toward Claire's office. The blinds were drawn. He had no idea what she was thinking, what she planned to do. Maybe nothing. Maybe she would let it go. Or maybe she was drafting an email to HR right now citing unprofessional conduct, misuse of company. Communication systems, something that would stick. By lunch, the whispers had started. Ethan heard them in the break room, saw the sidelong glances as he walked past the cubicles near the west wing. He kept his expression neutral, his steps measured, but inside his mind was racing. He had worked too hard to lose this job. The salary wasn't spectacular, but it was stable. It covered rent, daycare, groceries, the occasional doctor's visit when Tyler got sick. Losing it would mean starting over, and he couldn't afford that. Not now. Mark Reynolds was the first to say something out loud. He leaned against the counter near the coffee machine, arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. Mark was younger than Ethan by a few years. Sharp-featured, always dressed just a little too well for a mid-level position. He had joined the company 8 months ago and had been angling for a promotion ever since. "So," Mark said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by the 3 other people in the break room. "What'd you say to her?" Ethan poured his coffee without looking up. "Nothing. Come on, man. She doesn't just walk over to someone's desk like that for nothing." Mark grinned, but there was no humor in it. "You two got something going on?" Ethan turned, meeting his gaze directly. "No." Mark raised his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, I'm just saying, people are curious. She's never spoken to any of us like that. Makes you wonder." Ethan didn't respond. He took his coffee and walked out, leaving Mark's laughter trailing behind him. The rest of the day passed, in a haze of half-finished tasks and mounting anxiety. Every time his phone buzzed, he checked it, hoping it was just Tyler, Drea, ding that it might be HR. By 5, his shoulders ACHD from tension and his eyes burned from staring at the screen. He packed up quickly, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the elevator. The ride down was silent except for the low hum of the machinery. When the doors opened, he stepped out into the lobby and nearly collided with someone, Claire Anderson. She stood just outside the elevator bay, her coat draped over one arm. Her expression as unreadable as it had been that morning. For a second, neither of them moved. Then she stepped aside, gesturing for him to pass. "Mr. Miller," she said quietly. He stopped. "Yes." She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time he saw something other than cold deficiency in her eyes. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Curiosity maybe, or something else. "Next time," she said, her voice low enough that no one else could hear, "be more careful who you text." Then she walked past him out through the glass doors and into the fading daylight. Ethan stood there for a long moment trying to make sense of what had just happened, but there was no sense to be made. He shook his head, pushed through the doors, and headed for the parking lot. Tyler was waiting for him when he got home, sitting cross-legged on the couch with a drawing pad balanced on his knees. The neighbor had left a note on the counter. He ate, behaved, see you tomorrow. Ethan folded the note and slipped it into his pocket, then sat down beside his son. "What are you drawing?" he asked. Tyler held up the paper. It was a house, lopsided and colorful, with two stick figures standing in front of it, one tall, one small. "That's us," Tyler said, pointing. To each figure in turn. "You and me." Ethan smiled, pulling him close. "Yeah, buddy, that's us." For a few minutes the world outside didn't matter. The whispers, the stars, the cryptic words from Claire Anderson, all of it faded. But later, after Tyler had gone to bed, Ethan sat alone in the kitchen with a cold cup of coffee and the nagging feeling that something had shifted. He didn't know what it was or what it meant, but he knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow, the whispers would be louder. The whispers were louder the next morning. Ethan felt them before he even reached his desk. Eyes tracked him across the floor. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as he passed, then resumed in hushed tones the moment he was out of earshot. He set his bag down, logged into his computer, and tried to ignore the weight of it all. By mid-morning, the rumors had taken shape. Someone had seen Claire speak to him in the lobby. Someone else swore she had smiled at him, which was impossible because Claire Anderson didn't smile. A third person claimed they had been texting back and forth for weeks, that the message yesterday wasn't an accident at all. Ethan heard fragments of these stories as he moved through the office, each version more distorted than the last. He kept his head down and focused on his work. There was a quarterly report due by the end of the week, and he still had 2 sections to finish. The numbers were straightforward, but his mind kept drifting. Every time someone walked past his desk, he tensed, half expecting HR to call him in. But the call never came. Instead, the silence grew heavier, more oppressive. At lunch, he ate alone in his car. It was easier that way, no questy. Ons, no stares, no need to pretend everything was fine. He sat in a parking lot with a sandwich he barely tasted, watching people come and go through the glass doors of the building. Most of them were laughing, talking, living lives that didn't hinge on a single misplaced text message. He envied them. When he returned to his desk, there was a note stuck to his monitor, handwritten, unsigned. "Careful who you get close to. Some people don't deserve the attention." He crumpled it and tossed it in the trash without a second thought, but the message stayed with him. A splinter lodged somewhere he couldn't reach. Mark Reynolds appeared at his cubicle just before 3. He leaned against the partition, arms crossed, that same smirk from yesterday still fixed on his face. He had a way of taking up space that made Ethan want to push back, but he didn't. He just looked up and waited. "Heard you had another run-in with the boss," Mark said casually as if they were discussing the weather. "Lobby right after work." Ethan didn't answer. He turned back to his screen, hoping Mark would take the hint and leave. He didn't. "Look, man, I'm just trying to help," Mark continued, his tone shifting to something that might have sounded sincere to someone who didn't know better. "People are talking. You know how it is. Once the gossip starts, it's hard to stop, and if it gets back to her that people think you two have something going on, that's not going to end well for you." Ethan's jaw tightened. He saved his work, then turned to face Mark fully. "There's nothing going on. I sent a text to the wrong person, that's it." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Sure, but does everyone else believe that?" Before Ethan could respond, Mark straightened and glanced toward the executive wing. "Just saying, you might want to watch your back. People get jealous when they think someone's getting special treatment, especially when that someone is you." He walked away, leaving Ethan alone with the implication hanging in the air. Special treatment? As if Claire Anderson would ever show favoritism to anyone, let alone him. The idea was absurd, but absurd or not, it was spreading. By the end of the day, Ethan had overheard at least 3 separate conversations speculating about his relationship with the CEO. Each one painted him as either lucky or manipulative, depending on who was talking. That evening, Tyler was quieter than usual. He sat at the kitchen table, poking at his dinner with a fork, his eyes distant. Ethan watched him for a moment, then set down his own fork and leaned forward. "What's wrong, bud?" he asked gently. Tyler shrugged, still staring at his plate. "Mrs. Callahan asked if you were okay." Ethan frowned. "Why would she ask that?" "I don't know. She said you seemed tired." Tyler finally looked up, his eyes wide and serious. "Are you okay, Dad?" Ethan forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm okay. Just a lot going on at work right now, but it's nothing you need to worry about." Tyler didn't look convinced, but he nodded and went back to his dinner. Ethan watched him, guilt twisting in his chest. He had always tried to shield Tyler from the harder parts of life, the stress and uncertainty that came with being a single parent. But kids were perceptive. They picked up on things even when you tried to hide them. Later, after Tyler had gone to bed, Ethan sat on the couch with his laptop open, staring at the half-finished report on his screen. He should have been working, but his thoughts kept circling back to the conversation with Mark, the note on his monitor, the way people looked at him now. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. There was an edge to it, something sharper. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. He hesitated, then opened it. "Stop making yourself look pathetic. Nobody believes you." Ethan stared at the screen, his pulse quickening. He didn't recognize the number, didn't know who had sent it, but the message was clear. Someone was watching him, someone who wanted him to know that the rumors weren't going to stop. He deleted the message and set the phone aside, but sleep didn't come easily that night. The next day, the tension escalated. Ethan arrived at work to find his desk slightly rearranged. Nothing major, just small things moved out of place, his stapler on the wrong side, his notepad turned at an odd angle. It could have been the cleaning crew, but he doubted it. Someone had been here, someone who wanted him to know. At 10, he had a meeting with his team to review the quarterly report. Mark was there along with 3 others. The meeting should have been routine, but Mark spent most of it subtly undermining Ethan's work, pointing out minor inconsistencies, questioning his methodology. It was all framed as constructive criticism, but the intent was clear. By the time the meeting ended, Ethan's credibility had taken a hit, and everyone in the room knew it. He returned to his desk, jaw clenched, hands shaking with suppressed frustration. He wanted to confront Mark, to call him out in front of everyone, but that would only make things worse. So, he sat down, opened his email, and tried to focus. An hour later, Claire Anderson walked past his desk. She didn't stop, didn't look at him, just kept moving toward the conference room at the far end of the floor. But as she passed, she slowed for just a fraction of a second, and Ethan caught the faintest shift in her expression. It was gone before he could identify it, but it left him unsettled. That afternoon, Mark's campaign grew bolder. He started a group chat with several colleagues, ostensibly to discuss an upcoming project, but the conversation quickly veered into gossip. Ethan wasn't included in the chat, but someone forwarded him a screenshot. The messages were blunt, speculation about his relationship with Claire, jokes about how he must have impressed her, suggestions that he was sleeping his way to the top. Ethan deleted the screenshot and closed his laptop. He couldn't do this anymore. Not today. He grabbed his jacket and left early, ignoring the curious stares as he walked out. He needed air, space, something to clear his head. He picked up Tyler from Mrs. Callahan's house and took him to the park. They sat on a bench near the playground, watching other kids run and shout. Tyler leaned against him, quiet and warm, and for a few minutes the world felt manageable again. "Dad," Tyler said softly, "do you like your job?" Ethan looked down at him, surprised by the question. "Sometimes why?" Tyler shrugged. "You just seem sad when you come home." Ethan pulled him closer, resting his chin on top of Tyler's head. "I'm not sad, buddy, just tired, but I'm okay, I promise." Tyler didn't say anything, but he didn't pull away either. They sat like that until the sun started to E.T., casting long shadows across the grass. Ethan wished they could stay there forever, away from the office, the rumors, the relentless pressure, but eventually they had to go home. That night, Ethan received an email. It was from Claire Anderson, sent at 9:47. The subject line was blank. He opened it, his heart pounding. "Mr. Miller, I am aware of the rumor circulating within the office I will address this matter directly. Do not respond to this email. He read it 3 times, trying to parse her meaning. Was she going to shut down the gossip? Fire him to make it stop? He had no idea. But the fact that she had acknowledged it at all meant something. He just didn't know what. The next morning, there was a notice posted on the company internet. Mandatory all-staff meeting at 2 in the afternoon. No agenda listed, no explanation given. Ethan's stomach dropped. This was it. Whatever Claire planned to do, she was going to do it in front of everyone. He spent the morning in a fog, barely able to concentrate. Around him, the office buzzed with speculation. Some people thought layoffs were coming. Others guessed a major policy change. A few whispered that it had something to do with him, though they didn't say it loud enough for him to hear directly. At 1:55, the entire staff began filing into the main conference room. It was the largest space in the building, usually reserved for client presentations and board meetings. Ethan found a seat near the back, trying to make himself invisible. Mark sat 3 rows ahead, flanked by colleagues who kept glancing back at Ethan and whispering. At exactly 2, Claire Anderson entered the room. She wore a navy suit, her expression unreadable, S always. She walked to the front, stood behind the podium, and surveyed the crowd. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice calm and clear. "I've called this meeting to address a matter that has come to my attention over the past few days. It concerns workplace culture, professionalism, and the consequences of failing to uphold both." Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. He kept his eyes on her, trying to read her face, but she gave nothing away. "There have been rumors," Claire continued, her gaze sweeping the room, "regarding my relationship with one of our employees. These rumors are false. They are also damaging, not just to the individual involved, but to the integrity of this company." She let the words hang in the air for a moment. No one moved. No one spoke. "I want to be clear," she said, her tone hardening. "Gossip, slander, and baseless speculation have no place here. If I discover that anyone has been deliberately spreading false information about a colleague, that person will be terminated immediately. No warnings, no second chances." Mark shifted in his seat, his smirk finally wiped away. Around the room, people exchanged nervous glances. Claire's message was unmistakable. "Professionalism is not optional," she continued. "Respect is not negotiable. If you cannot adhere to these standards, you do not belong here." She stepped back from the podium, signaling the end of the meeting. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, people began to stand and file out. Ethan stayed in his seat, waiting for the crowd to thin. When he finally stood, he saw Claire watching him from the front of the room. Their eyes met across the distance, and she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Then she turned and left. Ethan walked back to his desk in silence. The whispers had stopped. The office felt different after the meeting. Not lighter exactly, but quieter. The whispers hadn't disappeared entirely, but they had retreated into corners, exchanged and hurried glances rather than open conversations. Ethan returned to his desk and found it exactly as he had left it. No one had touched his things. No one had left another anonymous note. The small victories felt enormous. He opened his laptop and stared at the quarterly report, the one he had been struggling to finish for days. The numbers made sense now. His mind was clearer. The fog of anxiety lifted just enough for him to focus. He worked through the afternoon without interruption. By the time 5 rolled around, he had completed 2 full sections. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Mark Reynolds didn't speak to him for the rest of the week. In fact, Mark seemed to go out of his way to avoid him entirely. When they passed in the hallway, Mark kept his eyes forward, his expression blank. The group chat that had mocked Ethan days earlier had gone silent. No one forwarded him screenshots anymore. No one asked invasive questions. The threat of termination had done what reason couldn't, but Ethan knew better than to believe it was over. People didn't forget this quickly. The rumors might have gone underground, but they were still there, simmering just beneath the surface. He had seen it before in other workplaces, other situations. Gossip had a long memory. On Friday afternoon, Claire Anderson sent another email. This one had a subject line, performance review schedule. Ethan's chest tightened as he opened it. The message was brief and professional, informing him that his annual review had been moved up by 2 weeks and would take place the following Monday at 9 in the morning. No explanation, no additional context. He read it twice, trying to determine if this was routine or something else. Performance reviews were standard, but moving one up without warning was unusual. He couldn't tell if this was a consequence of the rumors or simply bad timing. Either way, he had no choice but to prepare. That weekend, he spent hours reviewing his work from the past year. He compiled reports, tracked his contributions to major projects, documented the times he had gone above and beyond. It was tedious, exhausting, but necessary. If Claire was looking for a reason to let him go, he wasn't going to make it easy for her. Tyler noticed. On Saturday evening, as Ethan sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers and spreadsheets, Tyler climbed into the chair beside him and rested his chin on his hands. "Are you in trouble at work?" Tyler asked, his voice small. Ethan looked up, startled. "No, buddy. Why would you think that?" Tyler shrugged. "You've been working a lot and you look worried." Ethan set down his pen and pulled Tyler closer. "I'm not in trouble. I just have a big meeting on Monday and I want to make sure I'm ready." Tyler studied him for a moment, his young face serious. "Is it with the lady you texted?" Ethan blinked. He had never told Tyler about the text, about Claire, about any of it, but kids were sharper than people gave them credit for. They picked up on things, pieced together fragments of overheard conversations. "Yeah," Ethan admitted quietly. I tease with her." Tyler nodded as if that explained everything. "She sounds scary." Ethan couldn't help but smile. "She is a little. But you're not scared of her, right?" Tyler asked, looking up at him with wide, trusting eyes. Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. "No, I'm not scared." It was only half true, but Tyler didn't need to know that. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Ethan dressed carefully, choosing a crisp white shirt and his best tie. He dropped Tyler off at Mrs. Callahan's house early, then drove to the office in silence, his mind running through every possible scenario. By the time he reached the building, his hands were clammy, his heart racing. He arrived at Claire's office at 8:55. Her assistant, a woman in her 40s with sharp features and an efficient demeanor, gestured for him to sit. He waited, staring at the closed door, watching the minutes tick by on the wall clock.
At exactly 9, the door opened, and Claire stepped out.
"Mr. Miller," she said, her tone neutral. "Come in." He stood and followed her inside. The office was larger than he had expected, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Her desk was immaculate, not a single paper out of place. She gestured to a chair across from her, and he sat, trying to keep his posture straight, his expression calm. Claire settled into her own chair and opened a folder on her desk. She scanned the contents briefly, then looked up at him. Her eyes were as cold and unreadable as ever. "Your performance over the past year has been consistently strong," she began, her voice matter-of-fact. "Your work is thorough, your deadlines are met, and your contributions to team projects have been noted by your supervisors." Ethan exhaled slightly, though he didn't let himself relax. Compliments from Claire Anderson were rare, but they didn't necessarily mean safety. "However," she continued, and his stomach dropped, "there have been concerns raised about your conduct in recent weeks." He opened his mouth to respond, but she held up a hand, stopping him. "I am not referring to the rumors," she clarified. "I am referring to the way you have handled them. Several colleagues have reported that you have been withdrawn, uncommunicative, and visibly distressed during work hours." Ethan's jaw tightened. Of course people had reported him. They always did. "With all due respect, Miss Anderson," he said carefully, "I think anyone would be distressed if they were being accused of something they didn't do." She regarded him for a long moment, her expression giving nothing away. Then she closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. "I agree," she said simply. The words caught him off guard. He stared at her, unsure how to respond. "The situation you were placed in was untenable," Claire continued. "And while I addressed the broader issue publicly, I wanted to speak with you directly to ensure you understand that your position here is secure." Ethan blinked. "It is?" "Yes." She folded her hands on the desk. "The rumors were baseless and damaging. I made it clear that such behavior will not be tolerated. You are not under investigation. You are not being reprimanded. This review is simply to confirm what I already know, that you are a valuable member of this company." Relief washed over him, so strong it was almost disorienting. He had spent days convinced he was about to lose everything, and now she was telling him the opposite. "Thank you," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "I appreciate that." Claire nodded. "However, I do have one question." He tensed again. "Yes, the text message," she said, her gaze steady. "You said it was meant for your son." Ethan nodded. "It was Tyler. He's 7. And you sent it during work hours because I miss him," Ethan said quietly. "I drop him off early, pick him up late, and sometimes the days feel too long, so I text him just to remind him that I'm thinking about him." For the first time since he had met her, something shifted in Claire's expression. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it was there. A softening around the eyes, a faint easing of the line between her brows. "That's admirable," she said after a moment. "Being a parent while maintaining a career is not easy. especially alone. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Claire stood, signaling the end of the meeting. He rose as well, and she extended her hand. He shook it, her grip firm and professional. "Keep doing what you're doing, Mr. Miller," she said. "And if anyone gives you trouble, report it to HR immediately." "I will," he said. "Thank you." He left her office feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The weight that had been pressing down on him since that first misplaced text had finally lifted. He returned to his desk, logged into his computer, and got back to work. Over the next few days, the office slowly returned to normal. People stopped staring at him, conversations resumed their usual rhythms. Mark Reynolds remained distant, but that was fine with Ethan. He didn't need Mark's approval or his friendship. He just needed to do his job and go home to his son. On Wednesday afternoon, as he was packing up to leave, he noticed Claire walking across the floor toward the elevators. She didn't look his way, didn't acknowledge him at all, but as she passed, she slowed just slightly, the same way she had once before. This time, though, there was no tension in it, just a brief, almost imperceptible acknowledgement. Ethan allowed himself a small smile. That evening, he picked up Tyler and took him out for dinner. They went to a diner Tyler loved, the kind of place with red vinyl booths and oversized milkshakes. Tyler ordered a cheeseburger and fries, and Ethan watched him eat, feeling a contentment he hadn't felt in a long time. "Dad," Tyler said between bites, "are you happy now?" Ethan considered the question. Was he happy? Not entirely, but he was closer than he had been a week ago. "Yeah, buddy," he said. "I think I am." Tyler grinned. Ketchup smeared on his cheek and went back to his burger. Ethan reached across the table and ruffled his hair, then leaned back in the booth and let himself relax. The next morning, Ethan arrived at work to find a small note on his desk. Not anonymous this time. It was signed by Claire Anderson. The message was brief. "Your quarterly report was excellent. Well done." He folded the note and slipped it into his drawer, then turned to his computer and started the day. Around him, the office hummed with its usual energy. People talked, laughed, worked. No one was watching him anymore. No one was whispering. Mark Reynolds walked past his cubicle without a glance. Ethan didn't acknowledge him either. There was no point. Some battles weren't worth fighting, and some people weren't worth the effort. At lunch, Ethan sat in his car again, but this time it wasn't to hide. It was just easier, quieter. He ate his sandwich, checked his phone, and found a message from Tyler. "Love you, Dad." Ethan smiled and typed back, "Love you too, buddy. See you soon." He set the phone aside and looked out at the parking lot, at the people coming and going, at the world that kept moving, regardless of his struggles. He had survived. His job was intact, his reputation restored, and his son was safe and happy. That was enough. When he returned to his desk, there was another email from Claire. This one was part of a company-wide announcement about a new initiative focused on workplace culture and respect. She had followed through on her promise. The policies were changing, the standards were being enforced, and the message was clear. Gossip and slander would not be tolerated. Ethan read the email twice, then closed it and went back to work. He had deadlines to meet, projects to finish, a life to live. The text message that had nearly cost him everything was now just a footnote, a moment of chaos that had resolved itself through honesty and principle. That evening, after Tyler had gone to bed, Ethan sat on the couch with a cup of coffee and thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the rumors, the uncertainty, but also the resilience, the refusal to let one mistake define him. The quiet strength of simply showing up day after day and doing the work. He pulled out his phone and looked at the last message he had sent to Claire, the one that had started it all. "I miss you." 3 simple words meant for his son. That had somehow led him here. He didn't regret them, not anymore, because in the end, the mess. Age had been true. He did miss Tyler every moment they were apart, and that wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was something to be proud of. Ethan set the phone aside, finished his coffee, and went to bed. Tomorrow would be another day, another chance to prove himself, another opportunity to be the father and the professional he wanted to be. And for the first time in weeks, he was ready for